we wanted to like avoid any hint of previous animated looks of Batman. We wanted this movie to look like the original comic come to life. So we focused really directly and as hard as we could on trying to translate David Mazzucchelli's design style into the cartoon.
Fantastic.
And the tone too seemed to embody that as well.
Yeah, no, it's funny because so much of what is really great to me about the comic is stuff that's like almost. It's not. I don't really think of it as a superhero movie. Almost, you know, it's almost more because it's really more about Gordon really than Batman. It was Commissioner Gordon year one, but so all along the way, everybody has a tendency to like kind of fall into these kind of superhero tropes, like, you know, oh, you want to throw the bat symbol up in the sky and all this other stuff, and it's like no, you want to avoid all that. You want to keep it really down to earth, and that goes to all the fight scenes. All the fight scenes are all really kind of gritty and hand to hand, and you know, Batman's not leaping 20 feet in the air like a ninja and swinging around from buildings on a little tiny grapple line. All the technology is all, you know, it's all really, really low tech. So every step of the way, it was kind of, like I said, you almost have to kind of like fight your usual instincts for what you do with one of these movies, and that went to the sound design and the score. Every step of the way, it was like, no, let's make this thing unique. Let's not make it like every other Batman movie that we've done.
I think it's really your first character piece, you know, with really good action sequences in it.
Well, thank you.
So year one is one of the most seminal Batman comics out there. Was there any pressure on you guys of the feeling of getting it right?
Of course. Well, beyond just making fans happy, which I figured is kind of pointless at this point. I never worry about that because you can never please everybody. But because I myself am a huge fan of the comic, and it was one of my favorite comics ever. And I just wanted to do the comic right. I didn't want to do anything that would, you know, violate the purity of the comic. So I mean, that's why the movie came out short, even, is because we stuck really to the comic, and when it timed out short, we realized, oh God, we're like you know, 10 minutes shorter than we should be. Should we add new scenes? And it's just like, no, I didn't want to add new scenes. I didn't want to add anything that wasn't actually in the comic. So which is why we did the Catwoman short instead. So.
Was there any method to like get your inner Frank Miller out? You know, any sort of meditation or?
No. I mean, no. It's just literally the source material is so good, and that was another thing too. When we started really talking seriously about doing it, before we even read this or before we wrote the script, I went back and reread the comic because I hadn't read it in a number of years. And I was kind of like going, God, I hope it still holds up, because a lot of times you'll read something from 20 years ago and you go, oh God, it's really not as good as I remembered. But it was even better. Yeah. It was like it still holds up. I mean, the dialogue is really super strong. It's all really, really controlled. It's really the polar opposite of like The Dark Knight Returns. The Dark Knight Returns is everything is kind of like really big and over exaggerated and operatic, and Batman Year One is really, really toned down, and so. I'm just repeating myself now.
When you go from a film like this where it is more character and the tone is different and all that, and then next, of course, is Justice League Doom, is it a relief to step back into that arena, or do you kind of want to stick more with what the Batman wants?
It's apples and oranges. They both have. They're both fun to do in their own ways. But yeah, it is a little bit of a relief to once Batman Year One was done, to move on to something that was, even though it's based on a comic initially, it's not a direct adaptation, so it's a little bit more freeing. It's a little bit more. You have a little bit more leeway to do what you want to do. But again, I don't feel restricted by what we did on Batman Year One. I actually found it a real fun challenge. But it was, like I said, it was a matter of trying to do something really, really radically different than what we'd done before. Whereas Doom is a little bit more of what we're used to doing. So.
David Mazzucchelli's art seems very tailor-made for animation. Was it sort of easier than some of the artists that you've had to do in the past?
It was really, really hard to translate his stuff into animation. I kind of know why you think that, because if you look at the comic, it does have like really bold graphic lines and stuff, but the underdrawing is very, very realistic. It's almost photographically realistic. So it was really a challenge to come up with something that resembled his artwork, but still was loose enough to be animated and without all the detail. Because I mean, that was one thing about the comic is that it's got he has a really bold inking style on it. There's a lot of really heavy blacks which don't really translate into animation that well. So no, it was actually really hard. It was one of the hardest challenges I think we've ever had, was coming up with a look that retained the Mazzucchelli-ness of it, and would still hold up for consistency's sake through animation.
Cool. Is that always a tough thing for you when these movies come up? I mean, we saw in Public Enemy, it kind of followed the Ed McGuinness style, and then of course with Doomsday, it Michael Turner, and so now with Mazzucchelli, is that always really a struggle, or
it is?
Yeah.
Some of the weirdly enough, the Michael Turner thing wasn't that hard. Sam Liu was the lead character designer on that, and he actually kind of nailed it like really quick. That didn't take a whole lot of time, but Frank Quietly was a real challenge. The Ed McGuinness one was, like I said, was a real challenge. The Mazzucchelli was probably one of the toughest ones we've done yet. So, yeah.
Did you ever take into account Kevin Smith's addition to the Batman Year One story? Are you familiar with that?
I don't think I am.
Well, yeah, he had Batman pee his pants, so when he confronted the mob boss in Batman: The Widening Gyre.
I have not read it.
People weren't a fan of it.
Oh, okay. So the answer would be no.
Okay.
Was it kind of a sigh of relief for you when you kind of had everything done and realized that you were like under budget and didn't have to really chop things out, as opposed to in the past where you kind of maybe had to struggle, if that's the right term, to get things in that 75 minute time frame?
It wasn't necessarily a relief. It was actually a moment of panic when we timed out the animatic and realized that we were 10 minutes short. That was kind of like, oh crap, now what do we do? Because there's a number of ways you can fill out that 10-minute running time, and you could throw in a lot more, expository, establishing shots, panning across buildings and things, but that stuff's just all going to be padded, and you're going to end up cutting it out anyways. So we didn't want to go that route. And there actually was one other scene from the comic that we had not had in the initial draft, which was where Gordon went to go talk to Harvey Dent for the first time. And so we did actually put that scene in, but then we were still really short. So it wasn't a relief. It was just kind of like, oh crap, now what do we do? Because we got to add 10 minutes to this thing, and we have no time and no money. And it just, fortuitously, we just happened to have a Paul Dini Catwoman script sitting on the shelf, and I put two and two together and went, okay, Catwoman's in Batman Year One, we can kind of keep it in the same style, reuse some, cars and background locations and things, and, so we were able to, cobble it together pretty quickly and get it done, so.
Was the Catwoman script as part of the shorts? You guys
Initially, yeah. We, if we were going to do a second round of the DC Showcase shorts, the Catwoman short would have been one of those. And we actually had that script and several other scripts actually already sitting around waiting to go. So.
The voice casting on this one was really interesting. And these are people that you wouldn't think for these parts, but yet after you kind of rolls around in your mind. You go, oh yeah, that worked. Was that conscious to kind of go a little different in the voice casting?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, every step of the way, we were trying to avoid any hint of like melodrama or larger than life quality. So we wanted all the performances to be really, really naturalistic. So starting with like Bryan Cranston, who's just somebody I've just been a huge fan of for years and years and years. He was our first choice for Gordon, and fortunately he was available, and off we went. And he just grounds the whole movie in this real believable reality. And then Ben McKenzie, that was really tough to try to find a Batman for this movie, because I know everybody says, oh, why isn't it Kevin Conroy? It's like, well, I love Kevin Conroy. But this is a really specific version of Batman. He's really, really young. He's not really Batman yet. He's learning what it takes to become Batman. And literally, he's young. He's like in his mid-20s. So we didn't want him to sound like, the sure of himself, strong superhero. He needed to be a young, kind of lost guy. Again, I don't remember who recommended Ben, and I checked out his work, and I thought, yeah, this guy would be great. And his voice is deep, but not so gravelly deep. And so he still sounds young, but he sounds conceivably like he could be Batman. So it was all good.
He makes some gravelly attempts in the film. He does. He throws up some gravel once in a while.
Sure.
And that really kind of threw me off. Like, oh, Didn't expect that.
I was surprised at how much Gordon sounded like Batman. You know, he had that very
Oh, that's
confident,
interesting.
very, you know, he was the hero character in this. You know, especially when he goes with the bat.
Oh yeah.
That was just
Maybe he becomes a different kind of Batman.
exactly.
And Elijah getting that was a really interesting choice, but she pulls it off in spades.
I was going to say it's almost an obvious bit of kind of typecasting. I think I love Eliza. I think she's a really really great actress. I really want to use her in another piece someday, playing a part that's not quite so much in the the faith zone, because it's really kind of like I said, kind of in hindsight, kind of obvious casting. But she's great, and it was again when her name came up, it was like, oh yeah, she'd be perfect. So especially for this specific version of Catwoman. So.
Have Miller and Mazzucchelli seen it yet? Do you know?
I do not know.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so did Frank Miller or Mazzucchelli, did they consult, or did you speak to them at all during this process? No.
No, just did it.
Cool.
It's probably better.
Well, it's just I don't want to get. It's a little nerve-wracking. It's like, on one hand, it's like, yeah, I could consult with them, but if they don't like what we're doing for whatever reason, but then if I argue with them about it, it's like, oh, but I really think we should do it this way, then it's just like, but it's like, but it's their baby, so I just want to avoid it. It's like, no, just take our shot at it. Hopefully they'll like it when we're done. That's exactly what we did with All-Star Superman, and knock wood. Fortunately, it worked out really good.
With these films have made such a point of casting new people, and almost all of them trying to find new people for the characters. I'm wondering, with Justice League Doom, to go back to so many of the people from the past, what was that experience like? Being able to
it was just awesome. It was just fun. Again, I don't remember exactly why this particular one we decided to go back and just use all the guys again. But I think it was just literally a matter of we realized, hey, we have not had almost a full cast together in the same room together, playing these parts. That in its own way is a little bit of a kind of a special event. So, because that's a lot of the stunt casting comes from the publicity department. They strongly recommend that we stunt cast TV actors and movie actors, so that it helps them with publicizing the movie. We were able to convince them this time that bringing the original cast back was just, like I said, it was a special event in some way.
Another like 4 minutes, and then I'll bring you over, Kevin.
Okay.
Well, with Tim Daly also, it's odd though that Tim Daly sort of the new kid on the block in a way.
Yeah, kind of.
George
Yeah.
Anyway.
It was nice to use Nathan. He nailed it in Emerald Knights, and to use Hal Jordan. It was nice.
He's always good.
Is there anything else you can talk about that's coming up?
No, I don't think so. Well, I mean, Dark Knight's been announced, but I'm not really allowed to talk about it.
Is it exciting to do it? I mean, from
Oh yeah,
creatively?
but again, talk about a challenge. It's really hard. It's a really hard one.
77 minutes?
Two movies.
Oh, it's two movies.
Two movies, part one and part two. Yeah. So yeah, it was way too big to do in one movie.
Is it? Do you think it's going to follow the typical release schedule that you guys have had, which is what, like 3 a year, 2 a year kind of thing? Or
I'm not really sure anymore. I'm not. I don't know. I think part one comes out, I think, just about a year from now. Like, I think fall of next year, if not maybe a little bit sooner. I could be wrong.
I mean, speaking of idiosyncratic, pencils, Frank Miller definitely on that book. How are you adapting to that, I guess?
With great difficulty. It's just, again, like it's really, really tough, because with Dark Knight, it's a little bit similar situation to when we did All-Star Superman, in that Batman looks different in every single panel, which is quietly himself even, he apologized to me afterwards after we did the movies. He was like, I'm sorry, because I know Batman or Superman looks different in every shot. It's like, I know. But, so it was really hard to find one concrete version of him, for animation. And so it's the same thing with Frank Miller Dark Knight. It's all over the place in that book. I mean, literally by the beginning of the book, he looks completely different than he does by the end of the book. And by the end of the book, I think actually Frank was actually doing a lot of the inks himself. He was, not relying so much on Klaus Janson, so that changed the look even more. So it's really hard. It's funny when you go back and look at the comic now. It almost doesn't even look like Frank Miller art, because we're so used to what his style became from Sin City and onward.